is going on, everybody? Welcome to my edit with me. In case you don't know, my name is Daniel Abendroth, and this is my YouTube channel, Reaper for Podcasting. Get situated here. So I started Reaper for Podcasting because Reaper is a very popular DAW in podcast editing. But the information out there is really difficult. It's all geared towards music production. And so you have to sift through tons of videos in order to find what you're looking for and what's relevant for podcasting. So I decided to kind of filter everything down into what I do and what I use for podcasting, and into this channel. And I also started a group for others that use the software. So you can find that on Facebook, Reaper for Podcasting. So I also wanted to do this demonstration, this edit with me. I saw several people in the Podcast Editors Club posting time lapses of them editing, and this is something that I did about a year ago. I did a few edit with me and just live stream my editing process. So with everybody doing that, I thought maybe I should try this again. So here we are. So today I will be editing an episode of one of my client shows called Your Killer Life. It's about breast cancer. She's a survivor, so she interviews other survivors and other people in the space. So if there's products that are designed for survivors, she might interview somebody about that product. So do let me know if my levels are okay. Everything seems to be fine, but just let me know if my mic isn't loud enough. I won't be playing this music during the editing process, so don't worry about that. So without further ado, let's hop into it. So this is my Reaper installation. So I'm going to start by opening RX. I use RX6 because I haven't felt a strong need. Little more you, little more less music. Okay. Well, in this scene, the music should be off. Looks like my mic is pretty low. So let me do that. How is that level now? So I use RX6. I haven't felt the need to upgrade to any of the latest versions. This is working all right for me. So if you have a strong enough reason, let me know. But until then, I'm just going to chill with 6. So let me bring in the audio. And I have not, I probably should have, but I have not previewed this audio at all. So it is a interview. Yes, better. Perfect. So I'm using, as you can probably see, the Shure MV7. And looking at that, looks like my logo is right over my face. So what if I do this? We'll see if that's any better. So I have it connected via USB. I do have an audio interface, so if I do this again, I might plug in the interface and see if that works out better. Okay, cool. So waiting for this to process. So unfortunately, let me test this out.
No, please don't apologize. I'm over here and I'm thinking to myself, there's so much data that's already known. They know that 33%, 1 out of 3.
Okay.
Right.
And so that should be pretty level on your end with my mic and the audio. So this is a guest I have. She lives in a rural part of outside Seattle. There's no internet option, so her internet is very lackluster. So she does do a video podcast, but unfortunately her internet is so poor that like Zencaster or Riverside or any of like the premium services, they just don't work. So she's stuck using Zoom. Excuse me. So this is going to be Zoom audio, so please forgive me for that. So I start out by doing usually a couple passes of voice denoise, around 5.5, and just kind of see what the levels look like. So this looks pretty clean. I usually try to keep it under -70. So we'll just kind of test that out. And then with Zoom audio, because it's just so bad, there's not a whole lot I do with this. So I won't be doing a whole lot of EQ or anything, but I'll kind of go through my typical process. And do let me know what your process is, if you do things differently, or if you have advice on how I could do it better. And actually, before I forget, I downloaded a piece of software. Okay, perfect. So if you see down here, there is like this little thing. So my keystrokes will register. So that blank is, that's the space bar. So as I'm editing, kind of see what keys I'm using. So after the voice denoise, I tend to do multi-click. I pretty much do multi-click on every piece of audio I work with. As my ears have become more tuned to podcast editing, I notice that a lot more. So I always try to take out what I can. I usually start about 2.5. I skew the frequency up towards the high frequencies. And then to start, I just click output clicks only. So you only hear what's being removed. And then I just turn the volume up really loud. So if you're sensitive to multi-clicks, you might want to mute this for a second. It is very unpleasant, especially when all you're hearing is the mouth clicks. But this is the way I find is the best way to do this. And what I'm listening for is anything I don't want removed. So if you go up too loud, you can kind of start hearing it take out what she's saying. And we don't want that. We just want the unpleasantness. Okay. So that's pretty good. To click off so that way it processes the entire audio. Whoops. Actually, so I forgot to turn the output clicks only. So if I were to process this, it would take out all her speaking and just leave the mouth clicks, which is obviously what we don't want. So while that's processing, I'll hop over to her guest and do the same thing. Just find a period of silence. That looks so weird. Find a period of silence. Highlight that. Learn it so I can get the profiles. Control A and then process that. Alrighty. So how is everybody spending their weekend? How was your life? Been we've had some really nice days, and then suddenly decided just to go cold again. And let me know if the quality of the stream, I keep getting a warning that my bitrate is low. So if it's choppy or anything, or just looks bad, let me know, and I can try to fix that. So I don't want to, I guess we can actually. I can't do two.
West.
Wow, so sorry about that.
West. Everything I say, I can only say from my knowledge as someone who lives in the UK. But I'm.
All right, so I'm going to restart the stream because I keep getting an error. I'm going to try to tweak something. So please don't go anywhere. My video is probably going to cut out, but I will be right back. Okay, so I should be back. Let me know if you can see and hear me. Um, I think it dumped for a second when one of the RX modules was running. It can be CPU intensive. Yeah. So that could be what it is. I keep getting an error that like I don't like the bitrate's low. So I turned up the bitrate in OBS pretty decent now. Okay. So I turned up the bitrate in OBS. So hopefully that fixed it. But yeah, RX can be very CPU intensive, especially when I do a deplosive. So hopefully I don't need deplosive, but I'm going to listen to the guests and get a feel for that sound.
I should have mentioned earlier, my bad. It's breast cancer, but it's in the bones. And I basically got
So a lot of echo, which is not not surprising for a guest. So not getting a whole lot. My guess is that they're using their built-in mic, so it's not going to pick up much anyway. So I'm not going to be able to. I'm not going to need to run deplosive on the guest, but I'm going to listen to a little bit of the host and see if she needs a deplosive. All right, I'm testing the stream now. Let me know if it like drops or anything. I'm not getting any errors, so hopefully, fingers crossed, we should be good. And also, if you guys use Reaper, let me know kind of like what your proficiency level is, or if you have any specific questions. I've been using Reaper for 4 years now, maybe more, 4 or 5. And I remember like the learning curve being difficult of trying to switch from Audacity. But I don't remember a whole lot of like the struggles I had when I was beginning. So I'm trying to figure out like the best way to like release videos. So I'm kind of seeing like what's in like what comes up in the Reaper for Podcasting group and also in the Podcast Editors Club to kind of see what people are talking about. I think one of the next videos I'm going to record is going to be how like Reaper does the RX Connect type thing. Because I think it's Adobe Audition that has RX Connect where you can process audio in our Audition through RX. And Reaper has a similar thing, an external editor. So I'm just going to kind of demonstrate that process. But if you guys have specific questions, do let me know. All right, so let's take a listen here. Let me make sure my volume is way too loud for this. So I'm going to listen through and listen for any plosives.
We're here and I'm thinking to myself, like, there's so much data that's already known. They know that 33%, 1 out of 3, right? And yet, and you have something we don't have in the States, which is NHS. So I would hope there would be ICD codes that they could pull where they could get this information. And so it's really interesting. And as you're talking, I'm actually wondering to myself if part of it is because it doesn't fit. Actually wondering to myself if part of
So this is something I've picked up from Chris Curran. I'm always interested in other people's editing custom actions. I feel like I'm very slow moving through the edit process. Okay, well, part of today's stream is going to be one of my custom actions that I've been working on. And we can do that sooner rather than later if you need, or if you're interested. But if you ever use Adobe Premiere, there's the Q and W keys have like a really useful editing feature that I recreated in Reaper.
part of it is
Okay, so I have a plosive here, and something I recently learned from Chris Curran is like, so you can see this plosive right here and just kind of seeing where it's at. So it looks like it's around 200 or so. So I set my frequency limit to that, and I can keep everything the same. So I'm going to test this, just process this small section. Yep, and that went away.
Actually wondering to myself if part of it
Perfect. So I know this is going to need pulses.
part of it is because part of it
and I typically just do deplosive
part of it
on the whole track. I'm wondering if that's necessary.
that they could pull where they
What do you guys do? Do you do the whole track, or you just do bits and
could
pieces?
pull where they could get
And they're easy to see a lot of the times. So like when it's real bright down in the lower frequencies.
NHS. So could pull where
But it's a lot to go through the whole thing, piece by piece. I probably have to bolt in a few minutes, but I'll watch a replay. My alma mater is in the NCAA tournament for the only second time in 3 years, so I feel obligated to watch. Second time in 30 years. Okay, I get that. That makes total sense. Well, I'll be sure to cover it in this, so that way, whenever you watch the replay, it's going to be clear. Who's your team? I live in Memphis, so I never really. As a kid, I was really into basketball, but I've never really been into college. But like I live in Memphis, so like I root for the Memphis Tigers. But other than that, I don't really follow it too closely. Football is my sport. Drake Bulldogs. I have no idea who that is. I've never heard of them.
end up with a recurrence, but you were still a survivor because you made it the 5 years. And so it's like this
All right.
wishy-washy math thing that happens where we count the data.
So I'm hearing a little bit of sibilance. I'm going to just kind of have a listen and see what I hear. I haven't watched a college basketball game in 5 years or so. Well, if your team's only been twice in the last 30 years, that kind of makes sense. They're in Des Moines, Iowa. Not a basketball powerhouse on the men's side. Makes sense. I figured I probably heard of them. All right, let me know if there's issues with the stream. YouTube is giving me another error. All right, so I'm not getting a whole lot of sibilance. So I'm probably not going to run a de-esser. But let me check down at 2500. Whoops, don't want that. Just want to preview.
You talk about sexualization.
And again, just like I did with the mouth declick, mouth declick, I'm outputting the S's only, so I'm hearing what will be removed. And so I'm hearing way too much actual speaking that I don't want removed. So I'm not hearing enough. So my next step is to EQ. And I'd probably normally do more, but with Zoom, I don't really do a whole lot because it's just like polishing a turd. So I'm going to add a little low end because it just sounds hollow. And I always do a high pass to cut off lower frequencies and a low pass to cut off the higher frequencies. And then since I am getting a little bit of sibilance, I'm just going to drop this a little bit around that 4500 mark. And that's too loud.
Sexualization. There's the warrior subculture where, we're all warriors. And if we didn't fight it right, that's how we lost the battle, right? I mean, that's not how it's said, but as a person who's diagnosed with cancer, that's how it sometimes feels. And I know not for every.
So now over to the guest side.
That when
I'm going to check out the de-reverb because there is so much, it's probably not gonna. I'm probably not going to keep it, but I just want to test it out.
Basically, breast cancer cells can mutate. So what, I'm not an expert, but what I think happened is it was from the original primary I had. And even though there was no evidence there when I went into remission, it only takes.
Yeah, it's not really doing a whole lot, and I don't really, because it's a lot of echo rather than just like a little bit of reverb. It's not really worth it.
The extent of that.
Let me just check out the DS and see if I need to do anything here. Yeah. Not picking up a whole lot, so I'm not going to worry about it. And because it's A, Zoom, and B, sounds like she used her built-in mic, I'm not going to do hardly any EQ. I'll do a little bit around DS and see if that kind of helps. But other than that, it's just going to be the low and high pass. All right, so now I'm going to export. And then I always add dash PRO at the end for processed. And that way I don't, well, with M4A, it doesn't even matter. And this is pretty low, so I'm just going to throw a normalize on that. So M4A, you can't override it, so that's fine. But like a wave or whatever, I do dash PRO just to preserve the original. So if something were to happen, I at least have a raw copy. All right, so I'm going to hop on over to Reaper. So now that we're done with RX, hopefully YouTube calms down since I'm okay. So I pulled up my, just close all this, my project template. So each one of my clients has their own project template that just has all the defaults, so I don't have to mess around with it every time. All right, so we got the new episode for here, and I'm just going to bring in those two audio files. So it's going to be the two waves. Drag that onto new tracks and let it do its thing. Separate. And I have my Reaper set up so that way every new track is just a different color. Just kind of makes things more fun to look at. All right, so now I'm going to level the audio. And the first thing I do, I'm going to solo the track so there's no interference. I'm going to find the loudest part, which looks like that little section right there. You could probably also use this. Yeah, let me do that. So I'm just going to highlight this. I'm going to turn on the repeat R or this button. And I'm actually going to mute the Reaper so you don't have to listen to the same thing over and over again. So what this is going to do is just keep repeating this section. And so that way I can throw on my vocal writer, and kind of get this tune dialed in. So I do high at 12 and then 0 on the low end, and I just slide this up until this dial hits 0 at the loudest points. And if you don't know what vocal writer is, essentially it's kind of like the opposite of compression. So if you think of compression as it brings down like the loudest parts, vocal writer brings up the quieter parts. So I'm setting like my target, and then what's going to do is boost all the audio up to that point as best it can. So it won't touch the high parts. At least that's not what I don't want it to touch the high parts. So I'm going to turn this down until it gets to the loudest part and just hit 0 like that. But then it's going to give, +3, +6 dB of boost to the quieter parts, depending on what is needed. And then I'm going to throw on my first compressor. So kind of looking at this, she's not super dynamic. So I'm probably not going to need more than one compressor. But for other dynamic clients, I might do a second compressor. So I'm going to throw on the Shep's Omni-Channel. And this is one I start with because it has de-essing and EQing and a bunch of stuff built into it. So I like to have it like higher in the chain. But right now we're just going to use the compressor. So I'm going to leave it at 3.5 ratio and then just adjust the threshold until I don't want I do it in stages. So I don't want more than like 3 to 5 dB reduction. Excuse me. So I'm just watching my gain reduction and making sure that it doesn't dip too much. And then if I were to do a second compressor, if needed, then I'd look at bringing the threshold down to the quietest parts. I'm actually doing quite a bit here, so I'm going to leave that for now and just kind of see where we're at loudness-wise. And the whole point of this is to reduce that dynamic range. So I want to find a section like right here that has a mixture of like really quiet parts and really loud parts. And I'm going to highlight this whole thing with the repeat on. So it's going to cycle through and through. And then just kind of let me know what that dynamic range is. As well as what the LUFs end up being. So this is kind of a tedious part because I need a long enough sample. Excuse me. So it's just a matter of just kind of letting it run. So the plugins I use to level audio is actually, yeah. So I use, it's pretty much always. So I have the Waves Vocal Writer, which, like I said, boosts the quieter parts to try and match the loud parts. The compressor, which compresses the louder parts to match the quieter parts. So between those two, it's trying to find that happy middle. And then, so Vocal Writer, then the Shep's Omni-Channel, if I want a DS or EQ at this level. And then if I need a second compressor, I'll use the Waves API 2500, which I really like. And then I always throw a limiter, the Sonic Anomaly Unlimited. Always throw that on each track just to make sure that it doesn't peak. And then on interviews, I'll have it on each track, but then also put one on the master just so if there's ever crosstalk, then that part won't peak. So I'm getting a LUFS range of 4, so that should be pretty good. I shouldn't have a problem with that one. I typically try to keep it around like 3 to 5. That's just kind of my personal preference. So I'm going to throw on my limiter. Drop the threshold down to -9 or -0.9, and then I lower the output because with this, like lowering the threshold also like boosts the output. So I just kind of lower it to keep it balanced, and then I use my compressor to boost the levels. I'm going to reset my, and this is WLM. It's the Waves loudness meter. So I'm using the stereo version and got the short term, got the long term. So I want to get that long term up to -16 with a range I want to keep it at 4. So on my Chef's Omni channel, I'm just going to boost my output and then reset this and just let it go for a little bit longer. Boost it some more. And so right now I'm going to be looking at this short term because I want to get that. So it's bouncing between like -15 and -16. I set my target to -16, so I'll get this green check point or check mark whenever I hit it. So right now it's a little too high still, I think. So I'm going to boost it just a little bit more and then reset that and see what that leaves us with. So now if you look up on the waveform, I'm in the quietest parts. So that's why it's kind of quieter. But now it's going to reset to the loudest parts, as you can see. Okay, and so seeing that, we got a pretty big range, and it's hitting like -11 to -16, -17. So I am going to go ahead and just throw on a second compressor to deal with that. Just going to move that up, turn up the threshold. So I'm going to go to like a quieter part. And you want this, so right now it's set on gain reduction over on the source meter, out, in, and then GR for gain reduction. On the quietest part, you want this to like barely be moving. So you're bringing that threshold down just to the loudest or the quietest part, because you don't want to do too much. And so just to test it, I'm going to see what happens when it hits this really loud part. Okay, so went up to -6, and that's pretty dramatic. You don't want a whole lot of that, but for this, I'm just going to be okay with that. And I'm going to turn off the manual makeup so I can adjust the makeup gain myself. So now I'm going to let this run. Let me jump towards the end and just kind of see what that range is now. So the range is pretty good. Long-term loss is probably going to be a little quiet, so I'm just going to hit that just a little bit, and I'm going to leave that for now. Just for the sake of this video, I don't want to like drag this on forever. So we're going to switch on over to the guest side. Let me find the loudest part right here. I have repeat still on, so I'm going to keep repeating the small section so I can dial in my vocal writer. So I go up to where it goes over 0, and I'm just going to slide it back down until it starts hitting that 0. Perfect. Let me get a bigger chunk. What am I doing? The Sheps. And then just kind of get my compressor to that high end. And she's quite a bit more dynamic. So I'm going to turn the ratio up to like 4.5. Hey, Stationary Hobo Production. That's a fun name. Sorry, I am late. Did I miss anything important? Kidding. I will try to catch up. Thanks for doing this. So quick recap. I am doing an episode of Your Killer Life, one of my clients. It's about breast cancer. So I brought the 2 audio tracks, and just so you know, you shouldn't be hearing anything right now other than my voice. So don't think anything is broken. So I took both tracks into RX6 and did a little bit of noise reduction, multi-click, deplosive on the host, and then just like real little EQ, mostly high and low pass on the top and bottom, and then brought it over here. So if you're interested in how I use RX, since this is Zoom recordings, I didn't do a whole lot because, there's only so much polishing you can do on a turd. But if you want to see that, obviously you can go back and check that out. And right now I am leveling the audio, trying to get it to minus 16 LUFS. So I've already leveled the host track. So now I'm leveling the guests, and I put on my vocal writer, and now I'm doing my first pass of compression, and I'm watching my gain reduction just to make sure that it doesn't go too heavy. I want to keep this like 3 to 5 range. So right where it's at. So now, because she is pretty dynamic speaker, I'm going to select a larger chunk and then add on my second compressor, which is going to be the API 2500. Mark, hey, welcome in. Thanks for the recap. I happened to join late too. Good stuff. I appreciate that. Thank you. Nice to have the summary. Awesome. As people jump in, I might re-summarize it. But I'm so glad you guys are here and that you are enjoying this. I'm so nervous about showing my process. It's just like that imposter syndrome. I'm completely self-taught. I got started watching Pat Flynn's YouTube channel, or like his like how to start a podcast years and years ago, and just kind of self-taught myself all this. So I don't have any formal background, so I'm always afraid of like showing my process, and people who know what they're doing or like have the experience or the education are like, wow, you're doing it completely wrong. But so I'm always nervous kind of do this kind of thing, but I figure the only way to get better is to kind of show what you're doing. Hopefully you guys can kind of teach me anything I can do better, and hopefully everybody can learn a little bit from me. All right, so what I'm doing now on my compression is just watching the gain reduction. This is the Waves API 2500. This is the meter, is what these show. So right now it's on GR, which is gain reduction. I can do output, input, or gain reduction. And I want to make sure that on the quieter parts, this needle is barely moving, but on the louder parts, it doesn't go above like -3, -5, because I don't want to do like really dramatic reduction in the compression in one pass. So that's why I start off with the vocal writer to boost the quieter parts, and then I do 2 different compressors just to kind of compress the audio in passes so it doesn't just like degrade anything. And so I'm pretty happy with this. And now I'm going to pull up my loudness meter. My process is whack, so you're all good. I'm figuring out Reaper because I've stopped using Adobe Audition after a decade. Damn. So why did you decide to move away from Adobe Audition? Because I know like that's, I think, the most popular DAW in the Podcast Editors Club, for good reason. I mean, Adobe has really great software, and I know people love Audition. For me, it was the monthly subscription. It's just hard to swallow paying at first a lot, $20 a month or whatever it is. Now it wouldn't be an issue because I do have the Creative Suite, because my wife uses Photoshop and I use Premiere, so we have the suite anyway. But at this point, like, I'm so proficient in Reaper, it doesn't make sense to switch over. So I'm curious, like, why you're making that switch. And glad to have you in the Reaper community. It's such an underrated DAW. So right now what I'm doing is checking the range. So just testing the range, making sure that the compression is good and I don't need to adjust anymore. 4 LU range is fine by me. So I'm going to turn on manual makeup, and then just try to get this down to -16. So I have my target set at -16, so it'll kind of let me know when I'm in range. And I'm going to watch the short term and just kind of see what that's like. If I'm satisfied, I'll hit reset and then watch the long term. And this is kind of a long process because I need to get a long enough sample to really kind of test that the long term LUFS. Excuse me. So right now it's sitting at 17. I know I need to go a little bit higher. And then while I'm here, I'm going to throw on my limiter. I do a limiter on every track and then one on the master track if it is multi-track, just to catch. So I don't expect this limiter to do a whole lot. The only time I want it to take effect is when there's crosstalk, and just so in those instances, I don't get peaking. And then I do -9 or -0.9 on the threshold, and then -0.7 on the output to kind of get a level, because it will, if you just do the threshold, this plugin will boost the volume. So I bring down the output just to kind of keep it fairly neutral. Long story, but crashing more and more often for the last year. Then I tried to cancel monthly sub. I was going to be writing for 3 months, and that was painful. Wait, what? And then I tried canceling monthly sub /C. I was going to be writing for 3 months, and that was painful. That is crazy that it's starting to crash for the past year. Like, you expect like Adobe and like Premiere to be a lot more stable than that, given how popular it is. The only time I've ever had a crash with Reaper is when there's an issue with a plugin. So for some reason, I have Isotope's Nectar. Is Nectar? I think it's Nectar. But it, for some reason, like, it wasn't working. So if I opened a project that had that plugin active, it would crash. And so I was just able to, I forget how to do it, like start in a safe mode or something and just remove that plugin from the chain. Sorry, not clear. Trying to type quick. Totally understand. So yeah, so that caused a lot of crashing. And then yesterday I had a crash for the first time in a while. Not sure what caused it. But other than that, I don't think I've had any crashing issues. So that's a little bit loud. Pull that back just a smidge, and that's probably going to be good enough. Just kind of speed things along, I'm going to call this good enough, and then at the end off stream, I will fine tune it more, just make sure everything is everything's balanced. Okay, so now is a really fun part. If you're in the Reaper for Podcasting group, you might have seen the post from Riley. He is the owner of Podigy. He wrote one of the best guides, if not the best guide, on getting started using Reaper for podcast editing. But his company commissioned or like bought this script essentially to truncate silence. So what it's going to do, so here, a built-in feature in Reaper is the auto trim split, and that will go through and delete any silence. And this script that he has and that he shared with the group is $60. If you look in the group, you can probably find a link to it. But what it'll do is bring all the items together and eliminate any dead air. So let me just demonstrate it. So the first thing I want to do is turn on Ripple All, and then I'm going to select both tracks. And then I have mine set to J, so I have a chain, and I can show that real quick. So in my custom actions, I have J right here, which is I call auto split and consolidate. So what I'll do is going to do the auto trim split and then remove that silence. And then reset item snap offset. And if you ever use auto trim split, you'll know it has like that line. It's like the snap offset or something. I'm not sure exactly what it does. But I just do this to get rid of it because I don't like looking at it. And then this multiply selected items in between all tracks, gaps by X%. So that's the 3-step process. So let me demonstrate that. So I have both tracks selected and I have that set to J. So it's first going to do my auto trim split. So these are my default settings. And then just make sure to run signal through track effects for detection. So that way auto trim will process the audio after the effects. So after all my leveling is done. So that way, if you have like a really quiet part that might fall under your threshold, but it's louder after compression, then auto trim split will pick that up. So always make sure to run signal through the effects for detection. And then click process and let it do its thing. This is probably going to take a little while because it's 2 tracks and they are an hour long. Don't know why that disappeared. I'm hoping it's not, it's going to come back. Yeah, so this is going to take a little bit and then we'll demonstrate the next section. Mark says, I was paying the $50 a month for the full Adobe suite, but reduced that just for the photography package, Lightroom and Photoshop for $20 a month after switching from Premiere to DaVinci Resolve. Interesting. I might have to look into that. I think we're paying $35 a month. So I think I got like a special or something for the full creative suite. My wife uses Photoshop, and she's not going to switch over to GIMP. She tried that. It didn't work out. And then I use Premiere for my video editing, but I might have to check out. I've seen people talk about DaVinci a lot. So I might have to check that out and save some money. I've also looked into, I do a little bit of video editing in Reaper, mainly. So I have a couple clients that do, like this client here that does a video on YouTube. And so she records a video of the interview and posts that on YouTube. And so I'll do that kind of editing, very, very minor. So I don't do like any lower thirds or any kind of special effects or anything. It's pretty much cutting off the top and the bottom. And then if there are any major issues in the episode itself, then I'll edit that. But other than that, I don't really do any detailed editing. But for the YouTube channel, I do. And so I've been thinking about like looking more into Reaper to do the my video editing that I do for the Reaper for Podcasting YouTube channel. And if I can do that, or maybe if DaVinci, I can make that switch. I can save some money by getting rid of the Adobe suite and just doing that photography package. Because I had like the plan to learn After Effects, but that never came to fruition. Okay, perfect. So you see the auto trim split, cut out all those little bits of silence and all those big chunks. Now you're left with a bunch of single items that are a lot easier to work with. And so this is that really cool script that Riley shared. Multiply gaps by percents. He does like a -%. So that way it forces a little bit of crossfade. I don't like that because I tend to have to like undo that. And I know I can tweak my auto trim to make it a little bit better, but I just do 0. So watch this. So when I hit OK, you'll see all that dead air has been removed. And so if you're doing a zoom, there's always that like the internet delay. So it'll tighten that up. And I have one client that will take like a 30-40 second pause in the middle of the episode to try to think of what she wants to say next. And this is super helpful with that because I can just run this. And like I think one episode I cut out 20 minutes of dead air. And that's 20 minutes that you don't have to listen trying to figure out where to make your cuts. It's so, I love it so much. I know what's his name? Leandro Facchetti, I think is his name. Something like that. He has a script that essentially does the same thing, but you don't have to pay for the script, but it's just, he has a custom action. But it's a lot more complicated than this. This is kind of like a one and done thing. So you can check his video. That I think somebody also posted that in the Reaper for Podcasting Facebook group. So if you haven't already, join that group. So now the intro's already been pre-processed. You know, this one I don't do a music bed. The music ends. And then I can turn snap on. I just put the beginning track at the end right there, or at the end of the audio. And you can't hear anything. Okay. Excuse me.
Hello and welcome to your. Hello and
So you had to pay for this action. So this right here, this one you do have to pay for. That's $60. Or I pay 60. I think 60 euros. So whatever. I think it was like 65 US dollars. Yeah. So that one is premium. But if you look in the Facebook group, you can find the video to that guy who essentially does the same thing for free. And actually, I think you just download his action and import it into your Reaper, so you don't have to like bother learning how to do it. But for this one, I did pay for it.
hello and
So this is the custom action that I created. So if you've ever used Adobe Premiere, whenever you hit Q, it will delete everything from where your cursor is to the previous edit. So right now, whenever I hit Q, this section right here is going to be deleted. And also it jumps back a second. As opposed to do it manually, you'd have to like split this and then delete this and then click over here to play
hello
again.
and welcome.
And then I have W, which is the same thing, but on the other end. So whenever I hit W, you'll see all this be deleted. Just like that. And then my cursor jumps back a second. Combined with like the auto trim split is really helpful because you have all these edit points. And it shows you're turning 3 or 4 clicks or keystrokes into one. And so if you want to see what that looks like, it's actually a pretty long one. So this is the left edit. So you have like the play cursor, which is this green one.
Hello and welcome to your killer
orange one, and then the green one is your edit cursor. So the first step is that it brings your edit cursor to your play cursor, so that way you can do it on the go. So I'm going to mute Reaper for you, so that way you can hear me over the audio.
Killer Life, a podcast where we talk about the really.
So whenever I hit W, it doesn't mess anything up. So wherever that orange bar is, that's where that edit is going to make. So that way you can kind of keep going. And since it jumps back a second, you don't even have to like pause your recording to do that if you can see far enough ahead where the edit needs to be. So then it moves the cursors together, it splits it, it will select the previous track. So like right now, if I split this, by default, this item is selected. So this action right here will make sure this one is selected. Move cursor to the left of the edge. So then the cursor will come back to the beginning, and then this will be, the highlighted section will be removed. It'll move the play cursor to the edit cursor. So the reverse of this first one. Then it goes back a second and then brings the cursors back together. And then I found that this script right here causes my audio to peak. I don't know why, but it would just like, you get like the minus infinity. And so I did this clear all peak indicators just so it would reset the dB meter. And then the action right is a little simpler because you don't have to like select the previous item, but it brings the cursors together, splits, removes it, jumps back a second, brings the cursors back together, and then clears the indicators again. So those are the two custom actions that I've been working on. So right here I have this awkward breath. I don't like to start the episode with a breath, so I can just hit Q and it deletes that. And you can't hear anything. There we go.
Hello and welcome to Your Killer Life, a podcast.
And I like to edit at 1.5 times speed, and I have that set up to my numpad 2. We'll set that to 1.5, and 1 sets it to 1, 2 is 1.5, and 3 toggles the pitch preserve. So as I'm going, I can easily just switch back and forth as needed.
Hello and welcome to Your Killer Life, a podcast where we talk about the really real realities of a killer diagnosis like breast cancer with a focus on health, hope, and happiness as we build an intentional killer life. I am your host, Tammy Grable, Killer Life. I am your host.
So if you know Emily Prokop, she has like her trick to reduce breaths, where it's basically you just split this. And it's one key thing. So like one key will split this and then drop this down. And like this track will be like minus 20 dB, so that it just reduces the breath. The way I do it is it splits this, and then this section gets dropped by like 10 dB. So that way I don't have like all these different tracks. And that one is my breath reduction. And it shows split time at selection. So in this highlighted section, and then this nudge out of volume minus 1 dB. I just do that 10 times. And then go to play cursor position and then unselect all items. So this will catch up to wherever the play cursor is. And then it'll unselect this so you don't have to worry about deleting it or anything. So let me... And the reason I have that play cursor, whatever it's called.
I'm your host, Tammy Grable Whitford, and thank you for listening in. I have a question. Does the top...
Is so that way, if when I hear that breath, I don't need to pause the playback in order to like go back and fix it. So I can just, as I'm going through, and I'll demonstrate that here. Where is it? Remove selection. All right, so as I hear it, I can just go back, do it, and never miss a beat.
As we build an intentional killer life. I am your host, Tammy Grable Whitford, and thank you for listening in. I have a question. Does the topic of secondary breast cancer make you uncomfortable? Is it the invisible elephant in the room that no one's discussing? Have you had a concern about secondary breast cancer but didn't feel heard when you were talking with your provider or your providers? Secondary breast cancer and recurrence are both ongoing concerns in Cancerland, and so today, we're going to talk about it. My guest today is one of my international breast friends and describes herself as a cocktail slinging. Talk about it. My guest today is one of my international breast friends and describes herself as a cocktail slinging, art doing, zip lining horse rider, hopefully not at the same time, the zip line and the horse, before secondary breast cancer at the age of just 28. Tassia is an amazing advocate and has an incredible blog called Pink is Not My Color. And she is joining us from Wales. And so color is COLOUR, which will be in the show notes. Her writing style is ripe with authenticity that comes with, well, face it, a diagnosis like cancer. And Tassia, I just love your tagline. It's not about dying with cancer, but how you choose to live with it. Could you tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you, Tammy. That was lovely. Yeah, so basically, I had primary breast cancer at 24. 2004. 2024. 2016. I won't linger on that too much. Basically, went through it, the usual chemotherapy, I had a mastectomy, had radiotherapy, and then I was on like remission, essentially, what is.
So you can edit / make changes during playback. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how other DAWs do it. The issue I've had with making these edits is, all right, so like whenever I delete this part, everything, because of ripple editing, everything is going to shift back. Right? So let's say my play cursor is up here whenever I go to make the cut. So now suddenly my play cursor right now is at this point in the audio, but after I make that cut, it's now, however long forward. So then like the audio will jump, and I'll demonstrate
what it's like. You're fixed now, off you go. So I went off to live my life for a bit. That's what the zip line and horse riding. Then at 28, so January 2020.
So that whole section I missed. So I need to go back anyway. But yeah, you can do other things. And so that's why with my Q and W edit, I make it jump back a second
therapy, remission, essentially. You know what it's like. Yeah.
So that way, it goes back to before I made the edit 1 second, so I can listen through, so I can do that without pausing and I don't miss anything. So I guess I could probably do the same thing with my, because I have a custom action for my edit button, which I have at C. Oh, right here, Ripple edit. I'm wondering if I could do that same thing again. So like jump to the left edge of the edit, but then it's going to be an issue. Because it'll be the item on that where the cursor is. So something to think about. But yeah, but like you can do pretty much anything while it's going. It's just whether or not you want to deal with that skipping. The automation for dropping the output for the breath is fantastic. Yeah, because I did the same thing. So you know, you do the thing where you have this and you do Shift S, and then you try to like bring this down. And then I was using Emily's trick for a long time, because it's just you highlight and then you hit a button and it drops it down. Perfect, done. But then the more I got to thinking about it, I found that this action of nudging the volume down. So then, and then if you need to do it more, so if it's like super loud, you can just click on it again and just reduce it another 10. And then adjust it if you need to. But I find like that -10 is perfect most of the time.
I was on like remission, essentially. You know what it's like. You're fixed now, off you go. So I went off to live my life for a bit. That's what the zip line and horse riding stuff came into it. Then at 20, then at 28, 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 then at 20, then at 28, so January 2020, so January 2020, I was diagnosed. But on December the 31st, I went to a general practitioner, so the GP, with back pain, with back pain. So I've been having it all the way through December. Fell down the stairs at the start of December. Brilliant. So I left it kind of a month. And then it started getting worse and worse. I thought, I better go and check this out. So I went on December 31st, seen a back specialist. Long story short, because it is a long story, pretty much I went back and forth to the general practitioner 6 times, and I was assessed 10 times. So by different people, including the supposed back specialist. And by January the 30th, so not even a month later, or just about a month later, whilst waiting for a kidney scan, I was driving to work one day with my partner and I felt really sick. I opened the car door, my partner, and I felt really sick. I opened the car door, sick. I opened the car door, sick. I opened the car door just to be sick. I opened the car door just to lean out and, you know, do what you got to do. And kind of like, I just felt the blood rush from my face and this blackness. And I just remember feeling the pain at the back of my spine. When I sort of came to, my legs were underneath the car. I kind of fell out and my cheek was on like the cold, wet pavement. I mean, it was January, it was freezing. And I remember I opened up and I had longer hair then, it's like a bob. It was just on the floor. And where I'd sort of, sorry to be graphic, kind of like vomited a little bit, just like this white foamy. It had started like running towards me and I remember the panic thinking, oh my God, this white foam's coming towards me. But I couldn't move because my back and my spine and everything had like tightened up. So again, long story short, pretty much 14 hours later, then I had the diagnosis of secondary breast cancer. But by that point, if I'm honest, it wasn't really a shock to me. So kind of like what we touched on earlier when we were talking, the idea of, it's just kind of like, you know, you're young, you're not going to get, the idea of, it's just kind of like, you know, you're young, you're not going to get, you know, you're young, you're not going to get breast cancer, let alone secondary breast cancer. But what I wasn't told in my end of treatment care after my primary cancer was that there is a 33% chance of this coming back and killing you. The fact that it's not represented in charities, it's not represented by your medical team, they don't bring that information towards you. I found that really scary. And then that pretty much started my my advocacy journey then. my advocacy journey then, if you like, and my advocacy journey then, if you like, and yeah, how I kind of found your podcast and everything. So,
well, your blog is amazing, and you caught my attention.
So,
well, your blog is amazing, and you caught my.
So,
well, your blog is amazing, and you caught my attention with when fear kills, and I'm going to come back to that with when fear kills, and I'm going to come back to that. Before I do, I just want to say, I mean, look, you've been in the Daily Mail. There's a YouTube video of you talking about metastatic breast cancer in your 20s. And I'm going to link to all of that in the show notes for listeners or anyone who's watching on YouTube. So you'll be able to click that and follow that. So, and before we talk about secondary breast cancer, I do want to take a second because I did want to pull up the definitions, and I wanted to give those definitions not just off the top of my head. But recurrence of cancer, of course, is when cancer that is the same type as the original cancer comes back, although it may be in a different place, but it may be in a different place, but though it may be in a different place, but a secondary cancer can develop after you've finished treatment for the first cancer. And unlike recurrent, the secondary cancer is a different or new type of cancer diagnosis. And there are so many factors that play into that. And so when you were secondary cancer and not recurrence?
Yeah, that's right.
And so into that, when you were secondary cancer and not recurrence?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And
right.
Okay. And
right.
Okay. And I knew that because I cheated and looked at your blog and totally read your stuff before we got together. But I wanted to give the opportunity to talk about that because one of the things that caught my attention, and I didn't realize this, right? All of us in Cancerland, we're kind of we're all on the same train and at different stops and eating in different meal cars, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff going on. And so I hadn't thought about secondary breast cancer being something that might require a trigger warning. And, to your point, you're right. Like you ring the bell or you finish treatment or, whatever your healing process and treatment is, and you sort of think about being done. And yet I know for me personally, that I have a weird pain for 2 days and I'm like, oh my gosh, it must be the elbow cancer because my elbow's in, right? Like you have that constantly in the back of your mind. And so two things I really want to talk about, not just the trigger warning. And I made a note, so we'll both remember and come back to this, but also age bias. But your blog post, does secondary breast cancer upset you to the point that you need a trigger warning? Can you talk to us a little bit about that and kind of what your experience is there?
Yeah. I'll keep some of it vague. I'll keep some of it vague, just not drop various people in it, doxing, that sort of thing. But a few incidences occurred last year. So like you said, I thought, having been through primary cancer too, like you just said, I thought we were all on the same train, all in the same boat. I didn't realize how sort of cliquey cancer communities can be, how shocking that was. I thought, wow, we've all got this life-altering illness. And in my case, and stage 4 case, I thought, wow, we've all got this life-altering illness. And in my case, and stage 4 case, stage 4, by the way, is the same as metastatic secondary for anyone confused. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Well, we're dying with it. So, yeah, it is. Well, we're dying with. Yeah, it is. I'm confused. Yeah, it is. I got pretty thick skin. I'm okay, but yeah, it is. I got pretty thick skin. I'm okay, but confused. I got pretty thick skin. I'm okay. Confused. I got pretty thick skin. I'm okay, but you don't need to be so mean, kind of thing. So basically, it would happen. I like to go on a lot of forums. I like to find a lot of younger women dealing with it. My process of dealing with it is just to talk till the cows come home. So when I'm on certain forums and things, so you get into some discussion with people. And what I found is I've had to stop taking myself out of some younger women forums and start putting myself in secondary breast cancer forums specifically, because now I must stress, it doesn't happen often, but it has happened a number of times to put me off. You will get maybe one. It has happened a number of times to put me off. You will get maybe one in a couple of people who you're talking about it, and then you're talking about it, and then you're not trying to bring the mood down or anything. Say you're sharing chemo tips or something like that. Then you might say something, then you might say something which say, oh, but with stage 4, and you might say something that's on your mind, thinking it's a safe space, like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to live to my wedding. You just, if you can't speak openly in a cancer forum, why can't you speak openly?
Right.
And you might get some people, because some of it's anonymous, just say like, oh, I don't think that's the place for this kind of conversation. It's happened. It's happened online as well. Certain charity certain charity in the UK. Online as well. Certain charity in the online as well. Certain charity in the UK. Certain charity Facebook pages. There was a friend of mine who was featured on one of these on the charity Facebook page talking about her secondary cancer, and there were a few comments. They've been deleted. This happened a few months ago, and there were people in the comments kind of saying, "I didn't need to see this on my Facebook page," And it's really like, wow, I'm sorry that our life offends you, but you kind of, the frustrating thing about this is the advocacy and the raising awareness that we're doing is not for us. It's too late for us, unfortunately. I mean, hell, if I knew there was a 33% that I might get it, I might have been a little bit more vigilant. I certainly would have pushed a lot harder not to have 10 blinking assessments. Chemo brain. Chemo brain.
You are in the right place. You don't have to apologize for that.
Cheers. To my friend, the thought there, breast cancer.
Yeah, so that was the mistake. Obviously, she kind of stumbled over her words, but the fact that it was acknowledged and laughed, she laughed at it, is something I'm not going to be taking out.
The thought there, breast cancer. Can you help me, Tammy?
I sure can. Absolutely. Well, and, so we were talking about just in the forums, and I find this so interesting because I know my personal perspective has always just been, none of us asked for this shit show, right? Like we were just sort of drafted, and we're all here going through it and doing the best that we can to live our best life with what we have going on. And everybody, we're all at different stages. We're all, even if you can have two people with the exact same type of cancer with two different medical oncology recommendations, doing two different treatment regimens. And so you kind of never know. I know that from my own experience with my second opinions, right? How drastically they varied. And so we are all in the same boat. And if we can't have grace and love and support for one another, I would only hope that we could find that, regardless of the stage, regardless of gender. I've had a few male breast cancer survivors on. And so it is a little heartbreaking. And at the same time, I can say that as someone who's been through it, I understand, right? Hurt people, and not always intentionally, as we grapple with the realities of really what cancer can look like. And death, I can't speak for the UK, but I can speak for the States. Like, we don't like talking about that. So, death is a tough topic. And yet when you hear those words that you have cancer, your mortality and death are all of a sudden, like a 2x4 to the forehead. It is something that you are facing. And so I can understand. I can understand some people wanting to, I guess, protect their mind space, their mind space, for lack of a better way to put it. But at the same time, I would hope that we also have enough grace to understand that we have sisters and brothers in the same space that need to have these conversations in an open, authentic, genuine, caring, loving way, because we are all facing reality. Bottom line, yes, we are all walking towards the same destination, death and taxes. None of us get out of it, but there is a whole new level of awareness that comes with a cancer diagnosis. And so I'm so sorry that you face that. And I will tell you, I will share, I've noticed some of those similar things. When I was first diagnosed and I was in a forum and said that I had metastasis to my lymphatic system, to my lymph nodes, as well as my dermis, I was immediately and not so.
Agreed with Mark. Can you repeat those steps, please? Are you talking about the breath reduction? Absolutely.
Metastasis to my lymphatic system, to my lymph nodes, as well as my dermis.
Let me find
my dermis. I was immediately.
The next bad breath, I'll go through the process.
Immediately and not so nicely corrected that I had micromets. Otherwise, I would be stage 4. And it was interesting, stage 4. And
all right. So highlighting the section will tell the custom action where to reduce. And so the process is my breath reduction. So split items at time selection. So what that's going to do, it's the same as Shift S. It just makes the split at the beginning and the end of what you have highlighted. And then nudge items volume minus 1 dB. And what that's going to do is just going to essentially take this down 1 dB. but I have it on there 10 times. So it's going to do 10 dB. And then go to play cursor position. So that way, as you are playing back, because let me show you real quick. So as you're playing it back, if you click on an item, you're now focused on this, and it doesn't have that continuous scrolling. So what this does, and I also have this set to F, so whenever I hit F, it jumps to it. So that way you catch up to wherever the playhead is, and then unselect all items, because once you're done, like it's still selected, and if you accidentally hit delete, you've just deleted that section without realizing it. So I do unselect all items to make sure that nothing is selected so you don't have any mishaps. So that's the items. So split items at time selection, 10 instances of nudge items volume minus 1 dB. View, go to play cursor position, item, unselect all items. And then I also recommend clicking consolidate undo points. Otherwise, what you're left with so I'm going to do that and then click OK and then run this. So now if I hit Control Z, I have to do each separate thing in order to undo it. Whereas if you consolidate undo points, one instance will undo that entire custom action. So hopefully that makes sense. Nice, thank you. Awesome.
And it was interesting to me because, again, in that environment, you would hope that we're just lifting each other up and helping each other out. And I only knew what my doctor provided me, right? Like I don't have a medical degree, did not stay at a Motel 6 last night. This is not my area of expertise. So, I'm learning with everyone else. And I'm so sorry you had that experience. And I'm still kind of surprised, especially from a charity aspect, that some of that would be deleted, because in many ways, when it comes to advocacy, it seems like an important part of the message. This is the reality that we're dealing with. And there is a real sense of urgency. There should be a real sense of urgency because of it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, to be honest with you, speaking from the heart, after I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer and I got the first bit of chemo done, and then I was on more regular treatment and, I could walk, I started getting into advocacy because I thought there's got to be something more. Like personally, my healthcare wasn't great. I was let down by more doctors, not just in the diagnostic stage. I was let down by more doctors than I was, made well. So skeptical is a word. So I never really felt like I could fully trust in them. So yeah.
Is that consolidate all what? Consolidate all undo points. Consolidate undo points. So right now, without that checked, each item here, each one of these individual actions, you have to Control Z or Command Z, whatever it is on Mac. You have to undo each one individually if this is not checked. But whenever you have this checked, then they all get lumped into one, and you only have to hit Control Z. You only have to undo one time to undo all, 13 of these actions instead of doing Control Z 13 times.
The issue sort of came then, so I thought, right, I'm going to have to make some connections. Let's just get involved, throw myself in. And the more I started learning about secondary breast cancer, death started to become the easy thing to deal with. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, I know I'm going to die with secondary breast cancer. When that comes, I don't know. The lifespan that's quoted, lifespan that's quoted, I don't know. Lifespan that's quoted a lot.
Consolidates all the steps in the action to a single undo. Yep.
A lot in the UK.
I only recently learned that, so for the longest time, I was having to Control Z 10 times to undo all that breath reduction, like 10 or 12 times. And I saw that one day, I'm like, holy crap, that's going to be so convenient.
UK is 2 to 3 years, and then other sources say 3 to 5 years.
Especially on my Adobe style edit, because that's like 8 steps right there. But I can just do Control Z once to undo it.
Sources say 3 to 5 years, but they don't know exactly because they haven't even got the right data. We'll go into that in a second. So basically, so second. So basically it was like, wow, there's no consistency where you live. It's all throw caution to the wind. And the only thing you can rely on is the charities, which aren't, let's just say they could be doing a lot better. Let's just say they could be doing a lot better. Let's just say they could be doing a lot better as well. And again, I will elaborate on all that, not just to like, screw everyone over and just be like, everything's awful. I mean, I'm still alive, so obviously some things are going well, but I do think if I hadn't taken a lot of things into my own hands, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you right now. That's not saying don't listen to your doctor. That's just saying try to understand, like you said before, be your own advocate, try and understand what's in front of you, empower yourself. Doctors are not gods. Yes, they are educated in it. You should listen to them, but it's a conversation. But it's a conversation at the end of the day, not a dictatorship. So, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. 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 So, yeah.
I love that you said that, because self-advocacy is so important. And I always joke that you're the resident expert when it comes to your body, because you've been living in it for however many years you've had it. And so you really, truly are. And it is a dialogue. And so I kind of do want to go back and ask that question about age bias, age bias. Ask that question about age bias, because at, did you say you were 26 when you had that secondary?
28.
28. Okay.
Yes.
So originally at 24 in 2016, and then you were 28 with the secondary. So 28, you're still young. And, the crazy thing about cancer is that I was super healthy at the age of 43 and, like literally doing pull-ups, running every other day, exercising. And here I had a stage 3B cancer growing inside of me. Who knew? Right. And so it's sort of this weird.
So another custom action that I want to show everyone. So when you're doing an interview, a lot of times you'll get that, yeah, oh yeah, from the person that's listening. And that's really distracting and annoying. But whenever you're doing editing, when you're doing multiple tracks, you want to make sure to have this ripple all on. But in order to delete that, if you just delete it, you're cutting out from the other track, which you don't want to do. And so the alternative is to turn this off, delete it, and then turn it back on, which is way too many steps. And I had more than once, I would forget to turn it back on and start editing, and then my tracks would get out of sync. So the custom action I created for that one is right here, this 2-track cut. So it's pretty simple. It turns ripple editing off. It removes the selected item, and then it turns ripple editing back on, and then it jumps to the cursor position. So that way, as you're going through, and you probably see me do this a couple times already.
Who knew? Right. And so it's sort of this weird disease that until you know it's there,
you don't even have to stop the playback, and it just you just keep trucking along
there and start monitoring it. Sometimes it's really sneaky. And so at the age of 28, and you were horseback riding and zip lining and doing all these things. So I can see where a doctor might at first think, oh, well, might at first think, oh, well, you're 28, you're active, you're doing all these things. It's probably just you twisted your back, you torqued a thing. And yet 10 times is, my heart actually breaks for you, Tasia, because you shouldn't have torqued a thing. Things. And yet 10 things, it's probably just you twisted your back, you torqued a thing. Things. And yet,
what am I doing wrong? Oh,
the thing. And yet 10 times
helps if you hit the right button.
The thing. And yet 10 times is a lot. And so I think that when it comes to patient advocacy, my heart actually breaks for you, Tasia, because you shouldn't have had that moment in the car and on the highway to get somebody to listen. And so what changes have you kind of made for yourself when it comes to self-advocacy after, because I imagine you're a bit of a bulldog of a self-advocate after that.
But basically, since after the chemo and all the rest of it, I have been lucky. Like I've been stable, grown slowly, but within the parameters, So I'm happy on this treatment line. But before that, there were certain things. So basically, when I was in hospital, I was a nuisance mind. Every time my nurse would come in and give me my meds and line them up, what's that? What's the milligram? How much? Why am I on that? Every time. And think of this like 4 times a day in the hospital. And I did actually, again, not bad mouthing people that work in hospitals at all. Like I love them. There were a couple of occasions because they are human. A few occasions because they are human. A few agency nurses might have gotten some occasions because they are human.
occasions because they are human. You know, a few agency nurses might have gotten some of my dosages wrong or the wrong meds. Like someone maybe accidentally gave me another shot of paracetamol again, but then luckily because I was high on morphine because I was high on morphine, but I bloody knew what I was taking. And then it kind of like, I got a bit annoyed because when I left hospital, I was on high dosage of steroids for about a month. I needed them at the time. But long story short, because my life is just full of time. But long story short, because my life is just full of long story shorts, and we'd be here all day if I went into it. I was on these steroids and I didn't really need to be longer than a week. So within the space of a month, I'd gone from I'd gone from like 9.5 stone to 13 stone. No word of a lie. Like, you know, my bed, you know, stretch my body. Like, you know,
British chipmunks love it. Oh, if you want to hear real British chipmunks.
Of a month, I'd gone from like 9.5 stone to 13 stone. No word of a lie. Like, you know, my bed, you know, stretch my body. It's like being pregnant, but
just like on steroids, literally. Yeah. And I went into the oncologist meeting, and this was just before COVID hit, by the way. So
and welcome,
can't really blame
Carrie.
that.
Glad you could join us.
Now everyone blames it, but back then it was legit just, you know, issues due to certain miscommunications, certain issues here and there. Again, I can't really go into it, but let's just say, yeah, I was on medication I shouldn't have been on. And also, again, it was assumed.
Thank you. I learned a lot. I plan to watch the rest of what you do. I have to clock out because life. I totally understand life. Thank you so much for hopping in and chatting. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I could help you. I don't know if I'm going to do this again. I'm kind of thinking I will, but if you haven't already, join the Facebook group or subscribe to the channel. That way you can kind of be notified next time I do this, or whenever I just release other videos, because I have a lot of videos I need to release.
Medication I shouldn't have been on. And also, again, it was assumed that the cancer I had would be the same protein HER2 negative as I was on primary. So HER2 is like, yeah, the protein that sort of covers the cancer cells. They assumed I would be that because it's like, oh, it's only a 5% cells. They assumed I would be that because it's like, oh, it's only a 5% chance you won't.
I feel like this is some magic freaking editing. Don't tell, but you downloaded Reaper yesterday? Gasp.
Oh, it's only a 5% chance you won't.
Are you converting? Are you getting away from Audition?
Turned out I was HER2 positive, so I'd been on the wrong medication for a month. You know, so let's just say.
And what about this feels magical? Because like this is just like my normal daily life. So I'm curious, like what about this is prompted that response?
Say when it came to self-advocacy, I felt like I learned the hard way of I need to be on it. So then I just researched myself what it meant, you know, forums and websites and just constantly. And then when I joined MetUp UK later last year, it was brilliant because I literally have a question and it's just full of knowledgeable women in that group. So it's just constantly like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And I'm getting that. I'm so thankful to have found that now. But there's so many women that don't have that, and it's scary, and they have to turn to the charities. And the charities, you know, don't work around the clock.
No comment.
Yeah,
and limited budgets because they're
don't work around the clock, and yeah, it's
and all your crazy actions. Oh, okay.
And limited budgets.
Yeah, I have a few. So I have my 2 Adobe style left and right. My auto split and consolidate, which I don't know if you saw earlier. My better render, which I'll demonstrate at the end. My breath reduction, my special ripple edit. Oh, and this is. Thanks for sharing your process. You don't have to worry about any imposter syndrome. Your results speak for themselves. Yes. Thanks so much for saying that. That really means a lot. So this is what I was saying earlier from Leandro Facchetti. This, I believe, is his. And so it's a lot more complicated. I don't know what everything does exactly. I downloaded it to kind of look at, but this is his if you want to grab that. And then my 2-track cut and then my smart cut, which they basically do the same thing, except my X key is a little more versatile.
It's because they're charities, and so they're dependent on the funding that they can get through donations. But this is really
My cutter command. Oh, see, just like highlight and delete. Is that what you're talking about?
that they can get through donations.
Can you say that again? This man has get out of here. I don't need your encouragement. And if you're confused, Sparkle Adventures is my wife who has to deal with my imposter syndrome and insecurities on a daily basis.
Get through donations.
But I am getting better.
This is really important. So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like they assumed you had a recurrence, but you actually had a secondary cancer. Is that correct? Like they started by treating you as though it was the same cancer and it was just a recurrence of that. And then you had some additional testing and they found out it was not, that it had changed or something had changed and it was a secondary or a different diagnosis?
I think it was more along the lines of they knew it was secondary because of the CAT scan they done, and because I should have mentioned earlier, my bad, it's breast cancer, but it's in the bones. And I basically got it from both my femurs, my hips, my ribs, my lumbar spine, all the way up the vertebrae, the neck and the skull. So from the extent of that and from the CT and the MRIs, they could see that that was metastasized. So that was secondary cancer.
And now let's charge more.
It wasn't like a local reoccurrence or anything like that. But it's good.
All right, everybody who's in the chat now has to pay me $5. Is that,
that's a good question.
how that
I
works?
actually consider that. That might have been an option. But yeah, they just assumed that it might have just been basically breast.
And that is a joke, please.
Breast cancer cells can
Don't
mutate.
leave.
So what I'm not an expert, but what I think happened is it was from the original primary I had. And even though there was no evidence there when I went into remission, it only takes one cell to find the right environment. And if you've got bad luck, that's the way it is. And yeah, I think it just mutated into HER2 positive, and that's what got me to where I am now, essentially.
And I think it's also important. And I think it's also important to kind of pause for a moment and say, because we did both share experiences that were maybe not positive in some of the online groups and forums and things like that. And sometimes it's just not the right energy, not the right room, not the right. And sometimes it's just not the right energy, not the right.
And if you want to see what my action is for my cutter, as Gary puts it, but my main editing button, and this is something it's mostly from Riley of Podigy, but you select all items in current time selection, so that way on multi-track, so like if I do this, it'll cut everything that's highlighted, as opposed to like having to have it selected or whatever. Remove contents of time selection. Crossfade. So whenever you do this, you'll see there's an ever so slightly crossfade. And that's just to pick up. So Reaper by default, whenever you make a split, it puts fades at the end. So if you, it hides like little artifacts or like anything that you miss in the cut. Sometimes you get like that little, just a little. So that kind of does that. The fade gets rid of that. And this crossfade, it just kind of does a little bit better. And then unselect all items, so you don't have to worry about there we go. You don't have to worry about so without that, if you hit C twice, it'll just keep deleting whatever's highlighted. So this way you don't have to worry about if you move past it, you don't know what's highlighted. You don't accidentally delete something you didn't mean to.
It's just not the right energy, not the right room, not the right place. Because as you just said, there are those spaces where you have so many women and men who are sharing their experiences and so wonderfully open and authentic and genuine and in their care and being taking care in how they are interacting and being taking care and being taking care in how taking care in how authentic and genuine and in their care and taking care in how they are interacting with others who are on this journey. And I know for me, once you kind of find your home, you're like, this is great. You're contributing to community, you have community, and especially with all the COVID craziness, being able to have that has been absolutely amazing. And you're right, it's everywhere from charities to forums to Facebook groups to clubhouse rooms to Facebook groups to clubhouse rooms to Facebook groups to clubhouse to Facebook groups, to Clubhouse, to Facebook groups, to Facebook groups, to Clubhouse rooms, to like, there's just, there are a lot of us, a lot of us. And yeah, once you find your sort of like your cancer community home, it's a really, really good feeling.
It's a club you don't want to be a part of,
No.
but you're kind of happy you are at the same time because you found your people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. I think about how lonely and hard this would be.
Because you found your people.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think about how lonely and hard this would be. And, you know, it's just having, at first, when I was first diagnosed, of all the random things, you know, it's just having, at first, when I was first diagnosed, of all the random things, a friend of mine said, hey, I have another friend who, you know, it's just, you know, it's just having, at first, when I was first diagnosed, of all the random things, a friend of mine said, hey, I have another friend who was just diagnosed with breast cancer. Can I connect the two of you? So we were diagnosed in the same month. And even though our treatments were different, our cancer types were different, and, you know, our choices in bilateral, unilateral, like mastectomy, all the things are different, but still kind of having a buddy to go through it. Sadly, since then, I've had 3 other friends who've been diagnosed with cancer. And so sort of had this tiny cohort of people I already knew and loved that, you know, like literally with my friend and I being the first ones, you know, people saying, what does it look like when you're going through reconstruction, and sharing photos and having those conversations, which was really so helpful. And, you know, then kind of stepping out from that and looking at helpful, you know, then kind of stepping out from that and looking at some of the other groups and things, you know, and some of us went to in-person groups. I live in a very rural area, so the online thing worked for me. I'm loving Clubhouse right now, the Clubhouse app for that, because that's just been fantastic. But finding that community is really important. And I think the other thing interesting about the community is that sometimes, I shouldn't say sometimes, too often, you'll see a woman who will post a picture of something or ask a question and say, you know, this doesn't feel right and I can't reach my provider. I don't know if I should go to the emergency room or not. I don't know. And it's, you know, and with honestly any major procedure, but you know, I don't know. And it's, you know, and with, I don't know. With honestly, I don't know. With honestly, I don't know. And it's, you know, and with, you know, and with, I don't know. And it's with, honestly, don't know. And it's with honestly any major procedure, but you don't know. And it's with, don't know. And it's, you know, and with honestly, and with, I don't know. And with honestly any major procedure, honestly any major procedure, but you know, when you have implants and you have cadaver tissue and you're going through reconstruction, or even if it's your own tissue reconstruction, cellulitis is a real concern, MRSA is a real concern, like all of these things. And to have that knowledge base, that collective, is so powerful and such a good resource.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
So what would you really want men and women who have had breast cancer to know about secondary breast cancer and how to advocate for themselves?
Cool. I'm glad you asked that. So yeah, obviously in the UK, things are a little bit different to the US. So everything I say, I can only say from my knowledge as someone who lives in the UK. Obviously in the UK, obviously in the UK. So yeah, obviously in the UK. So yeah, obviously in the UK, things are a little bit different to the US. So everything I say, I can only say from my knowledge as someone who lives in the UK. But I'm sure it must work similar where you are, other than the fact that we have the NHS. I'm imagining it's kind of similar. But anyway, I can go into it from a British perspective. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
Yeah. So basically,
what is the command to strip out all the silences? So that is auto trim split. And I can kind of showcase it real quick. So I'm only going to do a little bit of the track because it's kind of a long process. So I have a chain for start a couple things, but to strip all the silence, it is auto trim. It's this auto trim / split items. And so here you kind of set your amounts, threshold, all this. And then when you process it, and then you wait, because it's quite intensive. you keep waiting. Probably should have done a smaller section. You're left with just the speaking parts, and all the little silences are pulled. And then I also have a script that will eliminate all these gaps. So if you have like a solo show and the speaker takes a lot of breaks to collect their thoughts or whatever, that's really useful. And then in interviews or multi-tracks, so like with Zoom, because there's always that delay between like the question and the speaker.
All the time, not just by your oncologists or whatever, but by we have the NHS.
You don't apologize.
By your government.
So it'll shore up all those little gaps in the interviews that's just caused by internet connection.
By your government, by the charities.
I had one because I have a client that like takes a lot of like pauses as she collects her thoughts, and you need to sell all those scripts. Here we go. I could. I don't think so. That one I probably wouldn't, because it's a premium script. So one, you'd have to buy it, and I don't feel comfortable selling a script based like using somebody else's paid for script. But a lot of the other ones I probably could. But I have a client who takes a lot of breaks and kind of collects her thoughts, and I think there is one episode that cut like 20 minutes of dead air from like an hour-long episode.
So when I started doing
really
more
good.
like self-advocacy, I was doing a lot of research for my blog, and I found Cancer Research UK is the biggest cancer research charity. Cancer research charity in the Cancer Research Charity in the UK, and Cancer Research UK. In 2018, they turned over £634 million, and that's just in 1 year, 2018. And it just made me think, and I know in the grand £1 million, that's just in 1 year, 2018. And it just made me think, and I know in the grand scheme of things, 634 million might not be that much money, but I thought, well, isn't it mad they're generating that kind of money every single year, but we still have to go through things like chemotherapy, which has been around since World War II. That's interesting.
So another thing to point out, you see down here, for some reason the meter peaked really high. I don't know what caused that. I know like my Q&W, my Adobe style edits, there's like an action in that would cause it. So what I ended up doing is there's an action that's like clear peak indicators, and I just set that to my backslash, so that way it clears all that.
So started digging a bit more. And I thought, secondary breast cancer. Okay, so by then I had seen the Met of UK and the statistics they presented forward. And, 31 people die a day of breast cancer in the UK. It's the biggest killer of women under 50 in the UK. So all these shocking numbers are coming out to me. And I thought, wow, the one that's... so all these shocking numbers are coming out to me. And I thought, wow, all these shocking numbers are coming out to me. And I thought, wow, the one that stuck out the most to me was 33% of women that get breast cancer will go on to develop metastatic breast cancer. So 1 in 3 people. I thought, that's huge. Surely that means that's represented in the charity. So I went to the biggest breast cancer charity in the UK, Breast Cancer Now, and they kind of helped lobby the government. They put a bit of money into secondary.
Sometimes it's chipmunk speed that makes meters spike. I noticed that in Audition, but it's not real. Yeah. Thanks again. I have to run. This was great. Thanks so much for hanging out, Mark. I really appreciate your feedback, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed this and you got something out of it. Like I said earlier, I don't know if I want to do this again. I think I will. I'm kind of leaning towards yes, but if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so that way you kind of get notified whenever I schedule another live stream. So thanks for hanging out, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. But yeah, I noticed that like the sped up audio causes the peaks are did it again. What did I do? Messes up the peaks. So I never really judge like the final audio based on the sped up, but
breast cancer charity in the
I never noticed something that's fairly recent.
UK, Breast Cancer Now, and they kind of help lobby the government. They put a bit of money, help lobby the government.
And the thing is, I never realized it when it happens. It's always like after the fact, so I don't know whatever thing I did caused it.
They put a bit of money into secondary research, clinical. They put a bit of money into. They put a bit of money into secondary research. They put a bit of money into secondary research, clinical trials, that sort of thing. And I thought this will be the one to go to. And I couldn't find any transparent information. All I could find was they aim to make breast cancer a chronic illness by 2050. And I thought I could die right now and I could be reborn and live to the same age I am now and it'll still kill me by the time they have a plan. So I thought, and there was nothing there to sort of say what they were doing towards that, what they were doing towards that. It was just very it was a lack of transparency. So into the forums, I asked around. One lady kindly sent me a screenshot of a chat she'd had with someone that worked there some time ago, and the number they came up with was Breast Cancer Now spent 18% of their budget towards secondary resources. And I thought, well, surely it should be at least 33% if you want to be diplomatic. And I thought, well, secondary breast cancer is the only breast cancer that kills. You can't die from primary breast cancer. Secondary breast cancer will kill you. It is a death sentence. I'm not flowering it up. That's what it is. And kind of the shying away from just that truth, like this is what it is. And kind of what we were talking about earlier, some women that have had primary might feel a bit upset and for their own personal mental health don't want to mental health don't want to deal with it. But mental health don't want to deal with it. But, it's a very real risk. 1 in 3 is a massive risk. Everyone needs to be aware of it. So you're sort of looking around and you realize no one's bothered. Everyone seems really just completely apathetic, seems really just completely apathetic, I wrote in the blog, coined it myself, but I love just completely apathetic. I wrote in the blog, just completely apathetic. I wrote in the blog, coined it myself, but I love coined it myself. Coined it myself, but I loved it. I was like, well, apathy kills more than direct action. So we need to take direct action on apathy. And that goes all the way up to the government. Like I said, the government put a mandate out in 2012 to find out how many people in the UK were actually living with metastatic breast cancer. It still hasn't been done. Still, it's taken 9 years to literally done. Still, it's taken 9 years to literally count people with my illness and go and put it into a computer. That's it. And now they need to have a meeting about an audit. And I'm like, why is this so hard? And yeah, so and I'm like, why is this so hard? And yeah, so that's my little rant there. But this is what a lot of people don't understand. It's secondary breast cancer doesn't need to be the death sentence that it is. It really doesn't. If we were given access to more drugs, if we were given access to more sentence that it is, it really doesn't. If we were given access to more drugs that we can't get on the NHS, a lot of people have to crowdfund for their own drugs. Also, there are silly rules that don't need to be there. So say if you have a certain type of chemo on line 1 of treatment, and then say that treatment runs out, it's growing, you go on your line 2. By the time you're on line 3, you could have this option of this wonderful clinical trial drug, but because you've had this chemo on trial 1, you can't have that.
Right.
So it's these weird red tapes that don't need to exist. They won't operate on you, they won't remove certain tumours because it's a little bit like, what's the point? Can't have that. So it's these weird red can't have that. So it's can't have that. So it's these weird red tapes that don't need to exist. They won't operate on you, they won't remove certain tumours because it's a little bit like, what's the point? Even though it will prolong your life. I personally believe that if they took even just the tools available to them now, I would guess that I could probably live till at least 60. I would be that confident if they literally used everything they could on me right now. But they just don't. It's a money game, isn't it? But it feeds into itself. Until they collect data in the UK, then they don't actually know how urgent it is. And then if they don't get the representation, then they're not going to collect data. So it's just constantly. Meanwhile, I've lost 8 friends since September. We are dying very quickly, especially since COVID. It's a very real issue. It's a very scary 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 issue. Yeah, sorry, it's kind of different.
No.
Scary issue.
Please don't apologize. I'm over here and I'm thinking to myself, like,
Issue. yeah, sorry, it's kind of different.
No, please don't apologize. I'm over here and I'm thinking to myself, like, there's so much data that's already known. They know that 33%, 1 out of 3, right? And yet, right? And yet, and you have, right? And yet, and you have something we don't have in the States, right? And you have something we don't have in the States, right? And you have something we don't have in the States, which is NHS. So I would hope there would be ICD codes that they could pull where they could get this information. And so it's really interesting. And as you're talking, I'm actually wondering to myself if part of it is because it doesn't fit the narrative of cancer survival, which I have a blog post from when I was first diagnosed, talking about cancer math, talking about cancer math, talking about cancer when I was first diagnosed, talking about cancer math. I was first diagnosed talking about cancer math and how ridiculous it is, because you're considered a survivor if you make it 5 years, right? And then, but you can still end up with a secondary and you can end up with a recurrence, but you were still a survivor because you made it the 5 years. And so it's like this wishy-washy math thing that happens where we count the data we want to count. And then I think there's also this, and you talk about the sexualization of breast cancer on your blog, but I think there's also this, there are a couple things. There's the sexualization. There's the warrior subculture where, you know, we're all warriors. And if we didn't fight it right, that's how we lost the battle, right? I mean, that's not how it's said, but as a person who's diagnosed with cancer, that's how it sometimes feels. And I know not for everyone. And I want to also say I support anyone who that is a part of their healing process, their journey. And they are absolutely, you know, can relate to that. It wasn't something that really are absolutely, you know, absolutely can relate to that. It wasn't something that was relatable for me. And then also when you think about, relatable for me. And then also when you think about, I call October the Cancer Awareness Month. I call it Cancer Coachella, right? Like, so here we have Cancer Coachella every month where we acknowledge the fact that we don't have a cure and we're still quote unquote in a race for the cure. And we're doing all these things for the cure. And while we're doing it, you have women who are literally fighting for their lives, but damn, their makeup is on point. They're right. Like the imagery that is given to us and shown to us. And so as you were talking, it really had me wondering if part of it is that it just doesn't fit that cancer narrative or the optic that, that they want to work with, or that, that they want to work with, or and that they want to work with, the optic that they want to.
So it seems to happen, but it's right there. So annoying. So it happens when I hit Q, use that function.
The optic,
but I have the clear built in
that they want to work with, or and by they I don't even know who I mean, society, you know, whatever, you know, that is the standard. I'll just put it that way. The optic that is the social norm of what breast cancer is, because it does feel oftentimes with breast cancer like we should be celebrating that we got a boob job, which we did not, that we should be, you know, grateful that we got the easy cancer, right? Like all of these things that are said to us. And then the reality is exactly what you're talking about, that yes, it kills. My gosh, I wish I could write fast enough, but apathy killing faster or killing more than direct action. I mean, that is absolutely true. And for us to really make a movement for understanding metastatic breast cancer, because that is something that has been, I don't know if it's been overlooked or if it's just been that research has been on early detection, and because that's where it started, that is leaving us with a focus on primary cancer. I'm not sure.
Nice. I mean, a lot of things you say in that, like, nice. I mean, a lot of things you say in
cancer. I'm not sure.
I mean, a lot of things you say in that, like, strike a chord, because when you're talking about, you know, who are they? First thing that came to my mind in the UK, at least, was the breast cancer charities. They are businesses at the.
I gotta run, but do this again. Number one, I'm listening to a podcast, and number two, I'm learning Reaper. All right, well, I'll do this again. I don't know when, but are you in the group? I might put a poll just to see what time, works best. So yeah, cool. Anyway, have a good weekend, and I hope it is wonderful.
At the end of the day, what is going to sell? What's going to make profits? I get not naming names, but that, you know, there are certain breast cancer charities where the people on the boards are earning triple-figure salaries. You know, this is, and there's people dying every day. Yeah, you can have advocacy group doing similar or the same work, actually lobbying, volunteering. It blows my mind. But to get that, I'm
going to grab the link to the group, just in case there's anybody watching that hasn't joined.
But to get that, you know, they have to push that narrative.
but it's a group full of other podcast editors that use Reaper. So if you have any questions, you're bound to find the answer in there.
It's fluffy, it's pink, let's go for a run. And yeah, I admit I was the same before I had cancer. I didn't know, because you do what they tell you. Like, we have so much information coming towards us. We need to filter what's relevant. So everyone is coming towards us. We need information coming towards us. We need to filter what's relevant. So everyone is aware of breast cancer. Like, there's been enough done for people to know that's the thing. That's the thing I need to be aware of. But then when it comes down to the thing I need to be aware of, but then when it comes down to it, they say then, like, their mother, or God forbid, they're going to turn to the last thing that they remember to do with breast to it. They say then, like, their mother, or God forbid, someone they know comes down with it, they're going to turn to the last thing that they remember to do with breast cancer. So it'll be one of those charities, and they go on the website and they might use things like the language, like fighter, survivor, So they have to learn the language directly from that. Then they use it. It can work a lot of the time. A lot of people I speak to hate the fighter term too. Like, a lot of people I speak to hate the fighter term too. Like, because it doesn't make sense, right? It's like, well, you fighting yourself, grand, like, oh. But yeah, essentially, it boils down to that. Sorry, my brain is awfully cloudy. Essentially, it boils down to that. Sorry, my brain is awfully cloudy.
No, I think I actually talked for a long time and threw a lot of things out there. So you unfortunately are dealing with my stream of consciousness as I was tackling that topic. So I apologize to you.
But yeah, going back to it, I think, seeing like women run marathons in pink, like women run marathons in pink, that's marketable. Or my mother that survived breast cancer 10 years ago, that's marketable. Everything, and then that's going to bring in, and of course, most of it does go towards things. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. All I'm saying is I feel like it could be done better. It's just all these little things in motion.
It's interesting. Because as you phrased it that way, sorry to
things in motion. Death by either.
It's interesting.
Motion. Death by either. Motion. Death by either.
It's interesting because as you phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. As you phrased it that way, I was like, you're right. Because as you phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. As you phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. Phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. As you phrased it that way, I was like, phrased it that way, I was like, because as you phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. As you phrased it that way, I was phrased it that way.
That's what it is. I'm like, why isn't it cutting on tracks? Because I turned Ripple off or on track.
That way, I was like, you're right. It's interesting. Phrased it that way, I was like, you're right. Because as you phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. Phrased it that way, sorry to interrupt. As you phrased it that way,
I'll figure this out. Don't worry.
Phrased it that way, I was
eventually.
It that way, I was like, interesting, because as you phrased it that way, I was like, you're right. Primary cancer is more marketable because you can pitch a happy ending. And right now with secondary, although I will also say last night in the Clubhouse chat, there was someone who was talking about their husband who had survived 17 years with metastatic breast cancer. So it's not that it's an immediate death sentence, but the fact is the end result is still there. And that is a less marketable end result. But at the same time, when you're thinking about charity and research and awareness it creates, at the same time, when you're thinking about charity and research and awareness, it creates, and it creates a true, genuine sense of urgency. And it seems like that's, the story that hopefully we'll start to see and tell. I know in the States, we're getting more attention towards metastatic breast cancer. But again, it's advocates and charities that are making that happen because the research has been sort of in that focus of primary,
Yeah, definitely. But in Met Up UK, by the way, definitely. But in Met Up UK, definitely. But in Met Up UK, by the way, don't know if you're aware, is the sister group of Meta, which was made in America anyway. So it's like, yay. Yeah, I'm actually giving you guys first, so I have to give you credit for that.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. I'm so glad. And I know I have so many sisters and brothers with metastatic cancer that are, you're just fierce advocates because you're right. You're fighting for the attention in the sea of primary cancer. And unfortunately, it does feel a little bit like cancer research and advocacy is kind of cobbled together. You look at overall outcomes for women of color, you look at outcomes for men, you look at subtypes and, at outcomes for men, you look at subtypes, and, me, I'm ILC, and lobular cancer being, 10 to 15% of cancer diagnosis. And so, and also being very different than ductal, so much so that we're starting to just research it. And so you have all these slivers of areas that need attention. And it really does feel, and I need to find some scientists to come on the show as well. And I need to find some scientists to come on the show as well, because it does feel like it's really sort of piecemealed, and I'm not quite sure where the direction is coming from for what it is that we're going to research next. But it is such an important topic. And you are also a success story, because, and I think we kind of, we talked about it, but we also sped forward to a lot of other things. When you had that incident in the car, you could not walk. And so I want to come back to that, because there are treatments. And even though you had the hiccups with the wrong drugs initially based on the HER2 negative versus HER2 positive, well, I'll just let you tell the story.
Yeah, so I was lucky in the sense once all that was kind of sorted, looking to move different oncologists, all the rest of it, sorted. Looking to move different oncologists, all the rest of it, had a wonderful secondary breast cancer nurse. So in the process of sort of moving over to a different hospital, a different oncologist, it was kind of like, oh, you're kind of stable at the minute, so let's not upset the apple cart and stay under her care. So basically, like, this nurse, her name's Anne Baker, she's retiring now, unfortunately. But fortunately for her, the only secondary breast cancer nurse in Wales, by the way. She was wonderful. So I kind of trusted her. She was wonderful. So I kind of trusted her at that point if I needed anything. And the deal was with the other hospital, it was my oncologist from 3 years prior, was that as soon as the scan came back and it wasn't quite, so it was questionable, I'd be straight back over there because I just didn't feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But now as things have gone, I've moved oncologist. But now as things have gone, I've moved oncologist anyway. But in terms of going back to last year, so I do have a tendency to waffle. Going back to last year, the chemo was brutal. I think up until July, I was very ill. I couldn't walk. I was in bed most days. My partner would come up, bring me water. It would be a success story if I made it down into the living room to lie down on the couch, then walk back upstairs. And I'm just so ill. It was because the metastases in my bones were mixed in with a lot of my nerves and things like that. So certain areas were numb. I was just so sore. And then, chemo's it's just I always say it's like having a really bad flu after cycling 100 miles whilst being hit by a bus. It's kind of what it felt like for me. Just having that with bone mets, which is really painful. With bone mets, which is really painful. And basically with the oncologist I had, it was whenever I said I got pain here, what's this pain, what's that? It was, oh, it's fine, take more morphine, up your milligrams. And I'm like, I don't really want to keep upping my milligrams. So I kind of went against what he said, and I'm not advocating this, but I felt within myself, I can do without this. So after towards the end of chemo, I started weaning myself. So towards the end of chemo, I started weaning myself off. Towards the end of chemo, I started weaning myself off a strong painkiller called pregabalin. And then I started weaning off the morphine slowly. And then around August time, when I was down to the last couple of milligrams, I just cold turkeyed it. One of the worst weeks of my life. I'm not going to lie. I've been on morphine since end of January. And I just went, nope. And I just went, nope. Yeah, it was stupid. But when you're just so desperate to get off the drugs, yes, drugs are saving me. And I take my letrozole every day. I still have my 3-weekly Herceptin pertuzumab. Don't get me wrong, drugs are saving my life. But when it comes to those painkillers, those opioids, I couldn't even say bread most days. I couldn't quite, it wasn't working for me. It wasn't right for me. So I just stopped taking them. And slowly I started to walk downstairs. I walked to the car. I went for a drive, and it was literally every day. It was oh my God, I'm in the car today. The next day, oh, I've walked to the front gate. It was just literally every day. I'm happy to report, 2 weeks ago, I went on a 4-hour walk up the mountain. So it's just this little steps. But yeah, it is essentially just you've just got to do it. You're going to spend the rest of your life bedbound, or it did hurt, and I couldn't sit upright, and I couldn't even lie straight. I couldn't lie with my feet straight, my back straight. Now I can, just every day, just doing that little bit every time. Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
I love that though, because that is, active participation in our own care. And I'm not a huge fan of the opioids. And so I was kind of on the other end where I would just put myself through the pain before I would take them. And I remember one specific time where I was sitting on the couch and Griff said to me, "You need to take some pain meds." And I'm like, "No, it's fine. It's fine." Because in my head, I was like, "No, it's just, it's like fitness. It's like anything else. It's going to hurt for a while. Then I'm going to figure it out. My body's going to adapt and my body's going to adapt. My body's going to adapt." And no, I took one and I needed it. But it is that balance, because you don't want to live in that fog. And I talked in one of my episodes just about the depression and the side effects from, yes, the pain medications are so important and the pain is sincerely present. It is significant. And I had never in my life experienced the fatigue that comes with chronic pain, which is something that so many of us have. And yet at the same time, we're all trying to balance this quality of life with all of the tools that we have. With all of the tools that we have, but still being able to be present and live and do something like that. I mean, you have me in tears over here that you walked like that for up a mountain. It
was amazing. It was amazing. It was lovely.
It makes me so happy. So stinking happy. So happy for you. But, and you did that. And your doctor, not that they're doing the wrong thing, because they're trying to keep you comfortable as you go through, something, painful, horrendous, and yucky. But that's that, I think, being in tune with your body and also with your desires and your heart and what you want out of this life, which is huge.
Absolutely. Like, just to chime in at the end there, it is that I did need them at the start. Obviously, I collapsed. I needed them. Hell, I needed them for 5 months. But at no point was that when the chemo was working and shrinking and they weren't in my nerves so much, there was no conversation facilitated. There was no, every answer was like, "How are you? I feel a bit sick. Take more nausea." I was like, "Okay, more nausea medication. I've got a bit of pain. Right, take your morphine." And it's like, yeah, but there needs to be a point where you're going, well, if the cancer doesn't, make it so painful, then maybe make it so painful, then maybe we need to look at other things. So I'm so thankful then for my secondary breast cancer nurse, because she actually came at me with solutions. Instead of saying take nausea, she's like, eat small meals and all the practical advice. But yeah, going back to the apathy, I felt like it was apathy on my oncologist's behalf of just take more meds, rather than looking at my scans and thinking, well, your tumor markers have gone down, maybe we can try this. I think what I'm trying to say is more of a proactive approach in all treatment, whether it comes from you or your oncologist, is always going to be a good thing. So, yeah.
I know in the States, and I was fortunate.
So,
yeah. I know in the
thing. So,
yeah. I know in the States, and I was fortunate enough. I live near Seattle, so I always joke, like, we're the land of hiking and granola munching, and we're all tech hippies basically. So I had access to an integrative clinic. So I had access to an integrative clinic where I had a FABNO, which is a naturopathic oncologist, who shared an office with a medical oncologist. And even though they didn't always agree, it was for me great to have the perspectives of everybody, the recommendations of everybody, and then be able to take that, do my own research, and sort of chart my healing path. And is naturopathic oncology a thing in the UK?
It might be, but not that I'm aware of. That's never been offered to me, or that is never something I've actually heard of anyone talk about. You do get the odd, and I mean really odd, on their own renegade, the sort of like, I'm going to do it my own way or whatever. But it's just not, it would be interesting just to get all sides, because I do feel like it is just one narrative here. Like this is what it is.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity.
I'm going to take a quick break, just a couple minutes. We're getting close to the end. I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes left of raw audio, and then I'll go through my render process and then probably call it after that. So hang tight. I will be back very soon. The problem is I don't have like a scene for this, so we'll do this. Very, very fancy. All right, hang tight. I'll be right back. And we're back. All right, let's see. We're at 5105. We got 102. So yeah, probably about 10, 12 minutes. So shouldn't be too much longer.
States, and I was fortunate enough.
I think next time I do this, I'm going to try to find a shorter episode because this one's quite long.
I live near Seattle, so I always joke, right? We're the land of hiking and granola munching, and we're all tech hippies basically. So I had access to an integrative clinic where I had a FABNO, which is a naturopathic oncologist who shared an office with a medical oncologist. And even though they didn't always agree, it was for me great to have the perspectives of everybody, the recommendations of everybody, and then be able to take that, do my own research, and sort of chart my healing path. And is naturopathic oncology a thing in the UK?
It might be, but not that I'm aware.
It's just me, I guess, on my soapbox, but such an opportunity to bring in nutrition, to bring in supplementation, to look at supplementation, to nutrition, to bring in supplementation, to look at whole body health instead of just the focus on treating the disease. Actually treat the whole person, I guess, is what I always say, right? Like, you're not treating a disease, you're treating a human, a whole human. And what does that entire environment look like? Because face it, when we're diagnosed with cancer, our goal is to immediately create the most inhospitable environment for cancer to grow. We create the most inhospitable immediately create the most inhospitable environment for cancer to grow and to also be on the long end of that bell curve, right? None of us wants to be on the short side or even in the middle. We want to extend our life, and our quality of life also matters as we do that. So, so much opportunity for growth. So much opportunity for growth and advocacy and awareness in this area. And I'm so glad that so many of us, and I will say this too, those who are diagnosed with breast cancer, who do not feel like being an advocate, do not own it. You don't have to be out talking about it. You don't have to be on a podcast or in the Daily Mail talking about breast cancer. But if you are someone called to do that, your voice does matter, and it does create impact and community for those who are not in that space, and for those who will inevitably come behind us in this diagnosis. So I want to talk about your blog for a second. I'm going to go back to that. So those for listeners, it's Pink Is Not My Color, COLOUR.weebly.com. And I will put that in the show notes, like I said. And you kind of touched on that. You touched on, and you kind of touched on that. You touched on total health, right? And your art, by the way, is so right. And your art, by the way, is so amazing. For those that don't, I will also say your Twitter account is fantastic because I love seeing total health, right? Your art, by the way, is so amazing. For those that don't, I will also say your Twitter account is fantastic because I love seeing your art out there. But so do you have any sort of like final art out there? So do you have any sort of art out there? So do you have any sort of like final thoughts and recommendations? And of course, any blog topic that you want to kind of touch on before we start to wrap up?
I think final thoughts and recommendations. I will mention again, just because I think it's such a great group. Like, like anyone that is thinking, they have secondary breast cancer and they're thinking, I would actually like to do a bit more. I want to have a voice. I want to, other than going beyond things like, you can write to your MP, express your concerns about COVID, be active that way. Hell, get in touch with MetUp UK, join us. We're always looking for more people. The more people we get behind this, the more we can put pressure on. It's what Jo, she's the founder of MetUp UK. She always likes to say, feet to the fire, ladies. You got to keep their feet to the fire. And I think, anyone, I was in that position last year. I was a bit like, I want to do something. I want to do something. This isn't right, but I didn't know what to do. I had a friend, Carolyn Garman, and unfortunately, and unfortunately, she was one of the people that I know that have died. She became one of the 31 on September the 22nd, I believe. And, it was kind of shut by it was kind of shut by chance. Jo got in touch with me and she was like, oh, you're a friend of Carolyn's, and bang. And then that set me off in that way. So I understand it's not easy to find these things. I understand it's not easy to find these things. So I'm just putting that out there now. MetUp UK. If regular charities aren't doing it for you, and you want an edgy group for you, and you want an edgy group that actually does stuff, go that. When it comes to blog posts, when it comes to blog posts and things like that, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's anything to touch on in my blog. If I'm honest, my blog is more of like a thing for me selfishly, I keep it as my own little archive. That's why I like to put like the things in like the Daily Mail and Total Health, and my partner was on Radio Kent, just so I know, right, this is what we said there, this is what was done, for my own accountability, because I'm terrible sometimes just talking off the fly, and I need to know my context for everything. That's what I've broken everything. That's what I've broken the blogs down into, like, you know, stories. So it's literally like primary and secondary, and then it's you know, I try to write the story bit. And I try to write the story bit as I was living it. So it's really descriptive. I'm a very visual person. I love to live in the present moment. So a lot of the story isn't so much like, and then I went to hospital, and then I was like, it's very much like, you know, about the atmosphere of the rooms. And I kind of just really enjoyed writing them, because it made me feel like an out of body experience. Like I wasn't writing about my own pain. I'm not writing about my own death. It's just like a way of expressing yourself. And it's wonderful. And then people like it because people know me are getting the updates from that. But then also I started hearing from people that I didn't know, and they were like, oh, I really like you. When you're like, oh yeah, I really like your blog. And I was like, people are reading that? All right, wow, okay. Maybe I shouldn't swear so much in it. I don't know.
I say you stay true to you, sis. That's all I can say. You stay true to you. And your swearing is part of what like totally got me in there, because I'm like, whoa, I didn't know this was a thing. And wow, yeah, let's talk about it.
But yeah, I guess that's like the long-winded answer of just essentially, I feel like it would be an injustice to just highlight anything in particular on my blog, because it's so varied. It is literally just an archive or a work-in project for all my secondary cancer efforts, thoughts, artwork, cartoons, whatever. So work, cartoons, whatever. Work, cartoons, whatever. So
I love it. And I love when you share your art on Twitter. So good. And thank you so much for being on the show today and talking about secondary breast cancer and metastatic cancer, breast cancer, and also sharing with us perspectives from across the pond. And I know I have global listeners. And so, you know, when I talk about healthcare here in the States, and even with you talking about healthcare in the UK, we still have listeners from all over the world, as cancer is all people, all nations, all people, all nations. All people, all nations, all over the world. All people, all nations, all over the world, and including breast cancer, which a lot of folks don't know. So tell me though, before we finish up, what are your plans with your art? Because I keep telling you need to do a calendar, but.
Well, I very slow start with the year this year, but I've been picking up a few things. You know, when is this podcast going to go out? Because a few things. You know, when is this podcast going to go out? Because I've been doing like a present for someone that's retiring.
Oh. It'll be a couple weeks, but yeah. Okay. It'll probably be by the end of this month. So yeah, for those who are listening, we do pre-record because I am rural and don't have great internet. So we don't do these things live. So this will be the end of March. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, I can say I've been working on that, putting a little video together for her and drawing a cartoon. I do draw other things. A little video together for her and drawing a cartoon. I do draw other things other than cartoons, but I need to pick that up again. I've been saying to a lot of the Meta UK girls, like, yes, I'll be back on it. I'm a terrible procrastinator. But once I start making cartoons again, they just come like weekly, bam, bam, bam. But it's like when I start it, that's when I know. I've got so many ideas. And I think that can be a hindrance sometimes, isn't it? It's like when you've got so much content, you're like, where do you start? There's nothing more daunting than a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper, and you're like, which one do I draw today? And hell, I'm only talking about cartoons here, not you know, conceptual art, but it doesn't matter.
Listen, if I was to do a stick figure, I would be overwhelmed with a blank sheet of paper. So you just never know. So where can folks find you? I know we've got Pink is Not My Color, COLOUR.weebly.com. Is there any other place that you would want to send them to where they can see your art or just get a dose of Tasia?
Not really used to plug in myself. I guess my Instagram, just Tasia Haynes. Not many Tasia Hayneses in the world, fortunately or unfortunately. I'm
one of a kind, broke the mold.
Yeah, just my Instagram at Tasia Haynes, and I've got like a little art Instagram at the site that some people like to look at. It's got like no followers, nothing. Again, it's just like an online archive. It's more of like realistic portraits of horses, and I like Madonna, so I drew Madonna and just things like that. That's called Preaching Koshka. So it's like preaching and the slash Koshka. It's like Clockwork Orange language. That's that because I'm a bit geeky.
Nice. And then, of course, I found you on Twitter. So you've got Twitter out there as well.
Yes, I do have Twitter. I'm kind of like new on Twitter. I've had it for years, but I never used it. And I've realised it's a great place to get involved in shoutout matches and mudslinging. And great. It weren't good for me when I didn't have anything to shout about. So when I just lived in my life, I was happy in my job. I was like, Twitter, that's a lot of negative energy. I don't need that in my life. Now that I need sort of people to know about things that are going on, I'm like, yes, this is great. So I think, yeah, Twitter, if you want to join me in nagging the UK government or anything like that, like, yeah, let's hop on board.
You are a model for advocacy. That's all I can say. And that's awesome. So good. We will have all of the links for Tassia and where you can find her, follow her, and check out her art. All of that will be in the show notes. Or if you're watching on YouTube, it's right down below. And I want to thank you for listening to Your Killer Life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and more importantly, share. Because the more we talk about breast cancer, the more we talk about metastatic breast cancer, the more open we are in the conversations. I'm going to quote Joe and say, keep their feet to the fire. Because, and then I'm going to quote you. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to quote you right, Tassia, but apathy kills more. Was it more directly?
Apathy kills more than direct action. Direct action kills more than direct action. Direct action is needed to kill apathy.
Yes, that. Thank you so much for that. For more information about what you heard on today's show, check out all of the show notes and all of the links in the show notes, or visit us at yourkillerlife.com. Don't forget to join us for a live after the show conversation on Clubhouse. And that happens Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And a little secret, we are going to be rolling out an after the show live conversation on Instagram in the near future. So you'll be able to join us out there as well. And until next time, thank you again for joining. Thank you again for joining, and keep building your killer life.
All right. Yeah, like I said, I'm probably going to pick a shorter episode next time because that was a lot. So now it's going to throw in the outro.
Your killer life. Thank you for your killer life. Thank you for listening to Your Killer Life.
And now I need to grab the title of the episode. And you'll see why in a second. So I'm going to bring up the render. And I have a better render, which if you see now, it's at 1.5.
So I start making cartoons again, they just come
sped up. With this action, it resets it back to 1 because more than one occasion I submitted an episode that I forgot to turn it back down, and the client just like, hey, this sounds really weird. So this way I don't have to worry about that anymore. Grab the episode title so that way I can add it to the metadata. Track number is going to be 24. Click OK. And then I always bring up my loudness meter. So that way it'll monitor the loudness as it's rendering. And so I kind of get one final glance to see what the loudness is looking like. All right. And so because this one's so long and I've got my compression and everything, you can see it's going to take over 6 minutes to render, and I'm probably not going to sit here for 6 minutes. What am I doing? Oh, yeah. So that is my editing process. And just looking at this, it looks like it's already too quiet. So I figured this before. I didn't want to really spend way too much time trying to level the audio on stream. I showed the kind of broad strategy or technique that I use. So I'm actually just going to cancel this, go back and just kind of get that final tweak. So, but having this at the end, just looking at this, you can know as you render whether it's good or not. So now I know I need to fix it. Wow. So, okay. I apologize. I didn't realize I was on the wrong scene that entire time. Okay. So I finished editing, and then, I mean, you saw like the past hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, of what that looked like.
Life.
And then I just drug my outro over, got it lined up, so that way there's enough music between the end of the episode and the outro. Control-Alt-R to bring up my render menu. So I edit at 1.5 times speed. So you'll notice whenever I hit the render button, it goes back to 1. And then clicking on metadata to put in the title and the track number. And then every client has their own template. So all this is already filled out for each one. And then just click bring up my meter. And then click render. And then since I already started rendering, this file exists, so I need to overwrite that. All right. And then you'll see it's going to end up at like 16 point. And as you can see, it's probably going to end up around 16.7 LUFS, which is too quiet. So I need to just tweak the tracks and see which one is the culprit. All right, but I'm going to end it there. Now I can go back to the camera. I'm going to end it here. I will be doing another one. So be sure to join the Facebook group if you haven't already. The link is in the chat. So send me, what am I trying to say? Join the group, and that way you can just stay up to date with everything I'm doing. And be sure to subscribe to the channel because I will be putting out more videos on how to use Reaper for podcasting. I think the next one is going to be how you can use RX with files in Reaper and how you connect them. Really cool, really convenient. So if you ever because I do all the processing in RX first and then bring it over to Reaper, but sometimes there's just like that little bit that you need to tweak. And so you can easily take that back into RX, tweak it, and then it updates automatically in Reaper. I'm not sure what else do I have coming up? So in this live stream, I demonstrated my Adobe style edits. I came up with another idea of how to make it even better. So I heard some knocking. So I will be implementing that and then releasing a video, just like a breakdown of how to create that. And then a few other things. So excited about that. So if you have any ideas about what kind of videos you want, or just any ideas of what you want to learn, let me know. So join the Facebook group, leave a comment on any of my videos, and I'll be sure to check it out. But until next time, I'll see y'all later.